Hi, I'm Neil Hermes, and this week I've got four great stories from around the world to present to you. One about the Eurasian Crane, the Hula site in Israel, house sparrows and are they disappearing, and poisonous birds. Hi, I'm Neil Hermes, and welcome to my bird wrap. My first story this week is concerning the Eurasian crane. Now, the cranes are an interesting group of birds. There's about 15 species around the world. They don't like the hot parts of the planet, so they're found largely in North America, in Europe, and in Asia, and parts of Australia. They largely avoid South America because it's too hot. So the cranes are a group of large birds. The tallest ones would almost be up to my shoulder. Most of them would be about my waist height. They're long-legged birds with a long bill. And the Eurasian crane is a sort of blue colour with a black neck, a small red spot on the head. A particularly handsome bird. Now, the Eurasian crane occurs from right across Europe, right across Central Asia, and right across to China. And it breeds in the wetlands, has a large nest, famous for doing spectacular dances at the nest during courtship. And then they migrate from their northern haunts down into parts of the southern parts of the world. The ones in Europe fly down through the Gibraltar into Africa. The ones in Western Europe fly down through the Middle East. The ones in Central Asia fly across the Himalayas to India. And the ones in China then fly down to parts of Southeast Asia. One of the remarkable things about the Eurasian crane is it's one of the top species in terms of known heights that it will fly at. Because it has to fly across the Himalaya to migrate, we know that they fly more around about or perhaps a little higher than 10,000 metres, one of the highest recorded flights for birds in the world. An amazing feat to be able to do that with the low levels of oxygen that requires, and to be flying and be using their energy to get across the Himalayas. The Eurasian cranes are really quite remarkable in their metabolic ability to be able to do that. One of the things that's topical about the Eurasian crane at the moment is because it disappeared in parts of Western Europe back in the 16th, 17th century. The last ones were seen in the UK, the last ones bred in the UK in the 1600s. There's now an effort to reintroduce Eurasian cranes to parts of Europe. Now, occasionally vagrants do still occur in Ireland and the UK and parts of France and Spain, but they're not established as permanent populations. So right now they're breeding birds in captivity in Europe and in particular in the UK, with the ambition that they will re-release them and they're not the sandhill crane, that's another species. The Eurasian crane will be reintroduced to the UK, and that will happen fairly soon. And I hope to be able to bring you stories about those reintroductions when they occur. My second story this week is about a famous migration location, and it's interesting because it connects to the crane story that we've just talked about. The Mediterranean splits the migratory birds that come out of Europe and go into Africa into two groups. Those that fly across the Straits of Gibraltar, and those that go around and largely go down through the Middle East, and in particular down through Israel. Some migratory birds do cross across the islands in the Mediterranean, but the two big migratory routes are down through Gibraltar and through Israel. And in Israel there's a couple of very famous places, and right now the migrations are happening, and it'll be a great time to be in these locations. One that comes to mind for me in Israel is the Hula wetlands. Now, this is a low wetland area near the Sea of Galilee where natural ponds have been increased with artificial ponds to have larger numbers of birds. They now have wetland walks that you can do and hides so you can see the birds. And the reason they've done that is that at this time of the year and then through the winter, huge numbers of European birds migrate either through there or are resident there. Vast numbers of cormorants, vast numbers of pelicans, and the Eurasian crane that we just mentioned in the tens of thousands occur in these wetlands around Hula. So right now, it'd be a great place to be, to travel to northern Israel to be able to actually see this migration that's occurring right now in November. And what a spectacular sight that is for those who are lucky enough to be there now. My third story today concerns the ubiquitous house sparrow. Now, there's not many parts of the world where people don't know the house sparrow. A small passerine that occurs in and around our gardens, nests under the eaves of our houses, occurred right across Europe and Asia, was released in the middle of the 1800s to North America and to Australia, New Zealand, and then introduced itself all around the world. One of the world's most common birds. Over 1 billion birds they estimate that we have of house sparrows in the world. But there's a curious twist to this story. They're very common and we know them very well, but in many places they're declining quite rapidly. And in fact, there's 50% less birds today than there was a decade or two ago. And it's been a curious thing that's been observed. It's been observed in the UK, it's been observed in the United States, it's been observed in Australia. And this well-known common bird suddenly has become uncommon in places where it used to occur. Now, the biggest, the suggestion for the most likely reason for this massive decline is the work that we're all now doing on our houses. As we buy old houses, one of the things that happens in the West and in affluent areas is we tend to do up houses. So old houses with big old eaves get modernised. They get cappings put on. They get new trim put on the houses, and the houses don't have those spots that birds can sit in underneath the eaves and get in onto rafters, etc., and nest where they used to. One of the clues to this is that house sparrows still seem to be relatively common in rural areas. And of course there you have barns and various sheds and things which haven't got the same treatment. So it looks like whilst we're making many cities much better for many birds, and I often talk about birds, say for example like our Victorian peregrine falcons that love living on the buildings in Melbourne. And there are many examples of birds that do actually find cities a good place to live. It would appear that we're actually making our cities less attractive for one of the most common birds on the planet, and that's the house sparrow. My last story today is concerning poisonous birds. Now, it might come as a surprise to many people to know that some birds are poisonous. Now, it's known that there are certain species of animals on the planet that have poison in them that then mean that other animals won't eat them. And some of the famous ones are the dart frogs in the Americas that they're highly coloured and they're full of poison, and that's to try and have predators not eat them. But it was unknown up until the 1980s that in fact some birds also have a toxin in them that makes them poisonous. And in fact, remarkably, it's the same poison that is found in the frogs in the Americas, the dart frogs. So the corycin, the corycin beetle that occurs in New Guinea is full of a particular sort of poison, and there's a number of species of birds in New Guinea, including the pitahuis, that eat the insects. The insects have the poison in them, and the poison is then absorbed by the bird, and the bird then layers down the poison in its skin and in its feathers. So people who handle this bird, particularly if they have cuts on their hands or if they put their hands in their mouth after touching these birds, then get poisoned from the bird. Now, no one has died from the poison from these birds. Native people in New Guinea who have these birds in their area regard them as birds that you shouldn't eat. So there's a tradition around avoiding these birds. And of course, no birds that we know of spit poison like snakes do. However, we now know that there are birds in New Guinea and in other parts of the world too, hoopoes and others, which eat a particular sort of beetle or insect that has poison in them, can make their feathers poisonous. And if you're handling them, a human handles them, you can actually be poisoned for it. Now, what we have no idea about is whether this has any adaptive advantage for those birds. It's hard to imagine how predators would know that this bird has poisonous skin or poisonous feathers, but we didn't even know that this existed up until the 1980s, so there's still plenty for us to learn about poisonous birds in New Guinea. So that's all I have for you in the wrap this week. Please just have a look at my, send something to my Ask Neil page if you've got any stories you'd like me to cover. And until next week, happy birding.